Morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started here. Today we're joined by Nicholas Papakonstantin. He's from VTT in Finland, which is a research institute there, where he's a researcher. He and I have been collaborating for several years now, including before I came to Mainz, and he was still at Aalto University. So today he has an interesting presentation for us about fault detection and identification systems, which is starting to become some of the things that we're actually doing together as well. So I'll let you introduce yourself more fully and take it away.
Thank you, Daniel. Hi, thank you for coming. I was worrying this time of the year how much audience will be, but I'm very happy to see the first time a few people. My name is Nicholas Papakonstantinou. I'm working at VTT, Technical Research Center. And in this brief seminar, I want to just demonstrate how we use machine learning to build a practical system for fault detection and complex systems. So I'm not a machine learning expert. I'm kind of more of a modeling and simulations guy. But a lot of work that I have done so far is on complex systems and safety concerns, analysis that we can do on that. So basically we will be talking a little bit about what is VTT, this weird name, what is the motivation for having to develop such a fault detection and identification system. Can we just figure out what the fault is? Do we need some kind of system to tell us what the fault is? Then some basics on machine learning, what is machine learning all about, and what are these fault detection systems? How do they work? How can we build one? Then briefly, we're going to go through a case study where we developed such a system, and also we try to improve upon that system. And some conclusions at the end, as always. So, VTT, Technical Research Center of Finland. So, just North Europe here, Scandinavia. This is Finland, and we are down here, South Finland, right next to some very pleasant neighbors, as is in the news. It is a quite well-known research organization in North Europe, but we are trying to build our name in the rest of Europe and in other continents as much as we can. Maybe sometimes when I was in Sweden and I was telling them I'm from VTT, they were telling me that we didn't know you work for Volvo. I said, no, I don't work for Volvo, but VTT is Volvo truck technician. Like, no, it's a research center, science. Okay, so our research institution is an interdisciplinary research institution. We come from all kinds of science, from biology to basic sciences to industrial applications. My team is the systems modeling and simulation team, where we mainly deal on safety aspects of critical processes. We have a lot of collaboration with nuclear power plant operators and utilities. We do system modeling and simulation, of course, and we build also a lot of software, a lot of tools to help us achieve these kind of goals. Our research and our work is basically split into projects that are publicly funded, so we participate in the funding and the results are public, or we do commissioned work. So a company may come to us and ask us to do something for them. So then that's like a commissioned project. So a few words about why do we need to even consider building a fault detection system. So this fault detection and identification system is basically just to support an operator, make good decisions, or it can be or it can be something more automatic. It automatically jumps in and isolates some part of the process that they think that there is a fault. It depends on the process, if it's how critical it is to capture the fault early. A few motivation points here, basically, as you might imagine, complex systems have a lot of failure modes in them because they have a lot of components. Every component has multiple failure modes. We cannot expect to have a diagnosis procedure for every single small fault that might happen. So in this work, we are going to be dealing with small faults in the process. Of course, the big major issues are obvious to identify. But what about if one little component entered the failure mode in one of a redundant system? So that's kind of more tricky to identify. When we have fast fault propagation, so our time constants are very small, we need to make a decision fast, where a misdiagnosis costs a lot, might cost us our system. And also in cases that we have a system that its subsystems are closely coupled, in the sense that we might have a problem in one subsystem, but the effects show up in another. So the first intuitive decision is that, okay, we look at this other system for the fault, but the fault is elsewhere. So we know that humans, operators, are limited to only be able to monitor effectively a few or some signals. And anyway, in modern systems, especially if regulation demands it, we have to have a good simulation model for the system, even to get a license. So if we think about the nuclear industry and so on, and if we have spent all the effort to build such a simulation system and to model our processes in detail, then we should try to use this as much as possible to get our investment back. And also there are many buzzwords at the end. Industry 4.0, Internet of Things, big data. So like, all these are nice, but we need to see what we can do with this big data. So this fault detection system is an application that uses this kind of data to do something practical and to help us.
So, Nicholas, would
Yes.
you, excuse me for interrupting, but will you entertain questions during your presentation, or would you rather?
I'm sorry, yes, definitely interrupt me whenever you like.
Okay.
I'm going to give Douglas the presentation, so whoever likes to have the presentation, you can just email Douglas if he will send it to you, or you can email me directly if you remember my email. So please, we are not so many people, so it's easy to have a little bit more interaction during the lecture.
Well, it's along the lines of philosophy, because I think I just heard you say that it's really important to have a good simulation model of the system in order to do fault protection. And as you know, I'm sure there are other models out there that say base it on data collected from the system.
Right.
So would you respond to that
Yes, yes.
query?
So the way machine learning works, actually having a very, very detailed model of the system might even hurt us. So we might overtrain our detection system, and then when it comes to a case that has not been in the training set, then it might get confused. So ideally, we would need data from the real process, historical data from the real process. We need data from a generic simulation. We need also data from a more detailed simulation. The more variability, the more diversity we have in our training data set, the more chances we have to build a more generic fault detection system that will be more clever, let's say, in a new entry that it has not really seen before, but it kind of reminds it of something. So we can definitely, in my case study, I'm using a generic model of a plant. But of course, we can use also all kinds of simulation models relevant to the process. So some words about what is machine learning? Again, I'm not an expert, but the way I have understood it is that we need to build algorithms to help computers to classify information. What does that mean? It means that we select a number of cases, we select a number of classes. Let's say if we have a group of people, we want to say that these people will have good credit scores, these people have medium credit scores, these people have low. And we get this data about them, and then we want to see that if a new person now enters the room, can you tell us what kind of credit score he will be? Can we give him a loan or not? So there are many applications, let's say in even machine vision, in natural language processing, in speech recognition. So we hear a word with many different accents, and then a Greek guy comes and says the same word with his Greek or like Oklahoma accent. So what did he say? Exactly. Can you categorize now this in one of the words in our little dictionary? It's an old field. It's not a new one. But it has benefited a lot from recent advances in computational power, and also there's a lot of research on new methods and algorithms for machine learning. So there are many different kinds of machine learning algorithms. There are the ones that are based on the model of the system, so they need to know the structure, they need to know how our system looks like, they need to know a little bit its behavior. So, and then there are methods that consider the system as a black box, and they are just based on data. So we know that we inject the font and we get these results, and we have no clue what happens inside. And then for these data-driven methods, there are again two different categories. There are methods that are they are quantitative, so they are based on real data, hard numbers. Or there are methods that are qualitative, so they just say that okay, the output is high, low, 0. So they have some kind of discrete classes. In this case, from my work, I have chosen a data-driven method, and one that is based on hard numbers, quantitative. So, to build a machine learning-based system, we need some algorithm that will do this classification we said earlier. So we need to have a way to train our system, and then a way to make decisions about which class the new entry that we have will fall in. So one example of such an algorithm are the algorithms based on artificial neural networks. I suppose that you have seen in the past these kind of models. It shouldn't be very new, but just briefly, we have a set of inputs. So these inputs are based on the data that we are having, the new data, incoming data, and then a system of perceptrons is activated based on which ones are active, and then waits on the inputs of the next layer of perceptrons, and at the end we have some kind of output. So these outputs are maybe now the different classes, and ideally we want one of these classes to light up, that we have the data about Douglas, his income, his career prospects, and all the data, and then we have that okay, he's a very good candidate for a big loan. So that's one method. Another method is this decision tree based method. So in this we try to figure out what are the guards over these transitions between different states of this decision tree, and then we want to end up in one decision based on whether we want to grant a loan to Douglas. So he asked for like $1 million for his new apartment. So we have all the transition based on data from his past to make a decision whether we want to give him the loan or not. So this, another name for this kind of work, apart from classification or machine learning, is also data mining, because it has been used a lot to process data of people on the internet and then try to understand what are they going to buy next, or what are they interested in, or what kind of video they want to view next, or what is their deeper thinking. So one story related to that is that at some point a guy got a package at his place with baby diapers. And he thought, okay, well, who sends me baby diapers? And then he asks around, like at his house, did anyone order baby diapers for some reason? No, it was like an advertisement for baby diapers. And then he finds out 2 months later that his daughter is pregnant. So how it went, I don't know if it was a real story or not, but anyway, how it went is that his daughter was going to the grocery store and buying all the things that pregnant women buy. So there was a trigger in the system of Safeway or whatever that said that she's a good candidate, like to start buying diapers soon, so let's send her some samples. And so this is an example of how systems can predict something based on past data. So, is there anything more you would like to know about machine learning in general? Some questions on that before we go into fault detection systems? Otherwise, we can start talking a little bit about our real problem, because machine learning is a tool. We can use it in many different ways. But fault detection, especially on complex systems, is the problem that we want to solve, or at least try to handle. So, the way the system is designed is, because it is not perfect, it is designed as a decision support system for operators. So ideally, we still need the human to verify that the result of the fault detection system can be accepted, or it makes sense, or it doesn't make sense. Of course, in some more advanced applications, where we need to have even faster detection and isolation of the fault, these systems can trigger automatic actions. The main goal of such a system is to try to identify at least where the fault is, based on the signals that is getting from the system. And even further, it may even try to identify exactly what is the fault. So it could be that the fault is in this subsystem, or it may say that the fault is valve A1 of this, and it has stuck open. Here is a basic overview of how a fault detection system is developed, how it is built. So we have our simulation, we have our historical data of past faults, past incidents of a plant. If we have a simulation, then we have to run our simulation over a set of faults and then get data. We're going to see more details on the case study about that. We can use both of these sources. Ideally, we can use both of these sources, real data and also simulation data. And we are going to split this into two. So when we have our data, the data entries is basically a set of signal values, let's say temperatures, pressures, from different parts of the system. And then at the end we have what was the fault. If there was a fault, what was the fault? So this is one entry. So we have many thousands of such entries. And this data set, we are splitting it into two. One data set, we use it to train our fault detection system, and one set we keep it for testing. for later on to see how accurate it might be. So we have a training algorithm, learning algorithm, if we use machine learning, that builds this system, the core of this system. So if we have chosen decision trees, then we build a decision tree. We have chosen neural networks, we build an artificial neural network in this phase. When we get the success rate on the training data set over a threshold, we can call it done and we are happy. We will continue to test our detection system. So we run this then model on our test data set. And then we can have either two outputs. One is that the results of the system in our test data were satisfactory, we can deploy the system on a real plant, or the results were not good. So we have to go back and see what was wrong. Was it the data set? Was it the choice of algorithm for fault detection? Did we have some systematic problems in our system? So what went wrong? So, just as bullet points, what I mentioned earlier, what do we practically need in order to build a fault detection system? First, we need to decide which faults do we need to identify. So we cannot identify. We can try to identify everything, or we can try to pick our battles and say that we want to identify these faults because they are very important. Then we need to, if we consider a plant, if we consider a system, we need to identify, we need to decide what kind of state will be the system when the faults will happen. So are we talking about steady state, startup process, shutdown process? At which phase of the operation of the system are we going to do fault detection? Of course, we can build one system for startup, one system for steady state, one system for shutdown, and so on. But we need to have like one decision there. Of course, we can have a kind of a cascading system that will first identify what is the status of the system and then transfer control to a specific fault detection based on what was the state of the system. Then we need to gather data, a lot of data, as much data as possible. The more data, the better. That's where, especially for big systems, that we have a lot of, that it's very difficult to get historical data. So we can get some isolated incidents, and in some cases we can get some data from a real plant. But that's very, very little. We cannot really build a system based on that. So in that case, we need to have basically a simulation. It can be a generic simulation, it can be a detailed simulation. In this case, a generic simulation has some advantages because of it being more generic, of course, and being faster. So we can run more scenarios and get more and more data. We need, then, when we get these big data sets, we need to do some processing and see if we have systematic errors. So it might be so that we might ask the system to identify when the valve has failed close. But in steady state, let's say, this valve is closed anyway. So this fault is not identified in this state of the system. Does that make sense? So if a pump is stopped anyway, and we want to identify if that pump has failed, stopped, has failed off, how are we going to do it? The pump is off anyway, so it's impossible to identify this fault. So we need to clear out our fault set from these faults that are not identifiable in that state of the plant, in that state of the system. The good thing is that anyway, these faults do not affect the plant, at least not in that phase. So it's not critical to identify them, at least in that phase, because they don't affect the output of the plant. Then when we have the faults that we can actually identify, they have some impact to the plant when it is in steady state, then we have to, so we have then time series. So imagine that we run simulations of a specific fault, specific failure mode, and we have then some time series of data from our system. Pressures, temperatures, and so on. So we have maybe 3 minutes time series. So from these 3 minutes, 180 seconds, let's say, time series, we need to decide how we're going to compact this and extract the interesting features of this time series. We don't need all the numbers, but we might need just the average, maximum positive deviation, maximum negative deviation. That is at least what I have used, but it has to be decided. How? What kind of statistics are we going to apply on this time series so that we get the best out of the features of this? One could say that we want to also know the rate of change, like the first derivative, or so. Then, when we have the data set, we are happy with it. It contains these features of the time series. Ideally, we don't need to develop the machine learning algorithm ourselves. Clever people have done it for us. So there are already frameworks that can take them this data, training data. They have a large selection of methods that can be used, from neural networks, decision trees, support vectors, many different methods. We can experiment and see which one of them works better for us. They can train our system, and they can give us a nice little summary at the end that, okay, these are the results and this is how your system will do in the testing. And even better, this can be used through an application programming interface. So we don't even have to go through the user interface. We can just build our own application and very fast check different setups. So of course we need to have such, it's very good to have such a tool. If the results are not great, then maybe this tool can give us some insight of what went wrong. If we have a problem with the data set, or it has some processing in the data set, and gives us some output on the training process, so we can see that, okay, the training failed in this phase, so we might change something to make it work better. We need to know what is acceptable result for our fault detection system, what is the success rate on the test data. And then we need to have a clear way then, after we have built this algorithm in this tool, how are we going to deploy it to the plant? Because if we just have it on the computer running on our test data, it doesn't really do that much work. Are the basics of fault detection clear? Are there any questions?
I have a question about the move from a specific measurement to a more general idea. So, one being, so you have measuring the flow rate to type A,
Right.
and it suddenly drops. And so the algorithm identifies, well, a fault has occurred, check pump P back here. Right. So there's a correlation between the pump operation and the flow rate.
Yes.
And it's measurable to the fault. Is that, so the question is somewhat twofold. The first question is that generalizable to any pipe and any pump? If you see a decrease in a flow rate in a pump, or in a pipe somewhere, therefore check the pump. And the other is how are other causes for that decreased flow rate? If we have a reaction process and suddenly a reaction decreases in one, a reaction rate drops in one part of the plant, which would also affect the flow rate in the separate part of the plant. But training the system to identify this correlation between flow rate and pump failure wouldn't apply in a separate system. So really,
That's why you look at the whole plant.
Okay.
You don't just look at the little subsystem, but you look at the whole plant. So the way this works is that you have all these sensor data from a plant-wide view of the sensors of your plant. So you monitor everything. You might be monitoring like 1,000 signals, 10,000 signals, all of the signals. So you don't just look at one flow and one pump, which might fool you, as you said. So the way, practically how this works is that you have some values, like the statistical values, averages and so on. So for every sensor of your plant, when there was this kind of scenario that you run in your simulation. So you have this data, and then you have that pump A failed. And then you have again some other entry of data. My reaction was lower than usual. And you have many examples of that. So you don't have just one entry, but you might have 100, 1,000 entries about the pump A failing at different levels of the steady state, let's say. You try to figure out how you're going to create more data. And many hundreds of entries about this other fault that could affect this flow on this pipe, but it probably affects also something else that the first fault doesn't affect. So a good then learning algorithm will train the system to distinguish between these two entries, so to tell you what happened. Of course, if two faults have a very similar effect to the plant, then there is a risk that the system will get confused. So that's why it's never guaranteed to be perfect. Okay, so a little case study. We wanted to find a complex system to try to see how this will work. And we happen to have a model given to us by Fortum Power and Heat. Fortum Power and Heat is a power utility in Finland that has a nuclear license. So, and we as VTT are working quite closely with them. And I was able to get a generic model of a pressurized water reactor. So this is just one diagram with a lot of information stripped out for confidentiality reasons. But there are all the subsystems of the plant there in different diagrams. I don't know if you are kind of familiar with how a nuclear plant works. This is the primary circuit. We have the reactor here. We have the pressurizer here. So this is full of water. This is maybe half full of water or something. And we try to keep a steady pressure in the reactor. And then we have many circuits for cooling the reactor and also to generate heat, generate steam. So these components are steam generators that interface with the secondary circuit and give us like the steam power that we need. And these are the main coolant pumps that circulate water through the reactor to cool it off and also to generate steam. So, data sets. It's important, it's very important. So if we have chosen what is the state of the plant that we need to be in when we have the fault detection. So let's say that we are more interested in steady state, when we have a constant power level. How are we going to get a lot of data? So one way is to say, okay, steady state, but at which power level? So we can start by having like 60% and then go by 1% all the way to 100 or maybe 110, 120. Go through a very big range. The more, so this is limited by our time. How fast is our model? How much time do we have available? What's the computational power that we have available? But the more data we gather, the more we can be sure that the system will be better. So in this case, there were 11 different power levels, and then results from 6. So the levels went from 91% to 100%, and 6 of these data sets were used for training, as it is noted here, and then 5 tests were used for testing, and I was kind of a little bit cheating that I chose 2 sets for training on the end, the 2 ends. So I was hoping that this would improve a little bit my system. So it's not completely, ideally we need to have completely half and half data for testing and half of the data for training. So I cheated a little bit, so a little more data for training. So in this case, we chosen 92 faults. So these faults are not big faults in the plant, are not like pipe leaks or loss of coolant accidents or like major events that are also quite obvious what has happened. But there were minor events like valves and pumps getting stuck in a certain position. And given that this model is maybe not very detailed, but it's detailed enough to have the redundant subsystems. Like we saw that there were 6 loops for the coolant of the reactor. So imagine if we have one of them, one valve in one of these loops getting like stuck closed. It's not so easy because you have 5 more loops cooling the reactor. So you're not going to see a major catastrophe immediately. It's going to be a minor effect on the plant. I told you that I chose 3 statistical values for every signal, maximum positive, maximum negative deviation, and the average value. That can be something different in a different application. I'm not a statistics person or expert or anything. And this is how we did the training and the testing. These are some pictures of how the setup was to be able to gather this data. We had parallel simulations. So we used a simulator built by VTT and Fortum called APROS, Advanced Process Simulator. It is quite used, at least in Finland, for simulating nuclear processes, combustion processes, and a lot of hydrodynamic-based models. In this case, I was just building some software on top of that to be able to run simulations in parallel. So I had a 4-core machine. I had a machine with 4 CPUs. So I was running 4 simulations at a time. Unfortunately, this tool is not very good in parallelization. So, but if you have many simulation runs, we can just run 1 simulation in every core and be fine with it. So getting the data, gathering the data was kind of a lengthy process with a lot of custom software. Then processing the data, like because we have a lot of this data series and we need to extract the features of every data series. This required some custom tool. So I'm just trying to say that we might have already the tool that does the basic training and testing of the fault detection system, but we will have to do some little bit of work before that to gather the data and process the data before we can use it in this tool. It's not so automatic yet. So this is the tool that I was telling you about that is developed by the University of Waikato in New Zealand. Free, open source. It has an application programming interface. We can use it in our software and do the trainings and testings quite fast. This is how it looks like when we have imported one of the data sets, the training data set. And it has a lot of features that I'm pretty sure that I will never understand how everything works. It's very, very advanced. And it's considered the state of the art in the machine learning community. Very fortunate to be able to have access to such a tool. So here I could even oh dear, sorry. Do you want me to show you a little bit this tool live, or I don't know how much time we have? So So this is how it looks, and then we can add our import our data set. So in this case, I have a comma separated value that contains my training data set. And we have all the different signals that, all the different inputs that are in the data set. As I was explaining this average fuel temperature, an example is about if we consider the fuel temperature as one of the signals from the simulation, then the average value over 120 seconds after the scenario has started, maximum positive and negative deviation over this time. These are the three values that we keep. Some other researchers don't do this feature extraction and they keep the whole data series. So whatever works for, but they get to say that they have so much data. So look at all these numbers. Then it's so easy. We have imported the training data set. We need to choose what kind of method, algorithm we're going to use. Okay. You can do it. You can do it. Maybe. Selection on this screen. I hope you trust me that I selected a decision tree with some specific parameters. So just from this big list that works well on this screen but not on this screen, I can tell you that it has a lot of lots of different options to choose from, and for every specific algorithm there are a lot of parameters that you can choose. So if someone is into machine learning, there's a wealth of experimentation here. So we have to choose what is the class that we need to work on. So we need to, here I'm selecting the failure mode, and how we're going to test our system. Okay. So we want to use a test set on the Windows. So the test set is a file that is custom to this webpack. And you can just do it, and it's done. So the fault detection system is now done. Have a little summary here, how many of the test instances were correctly identified, how many, in how many cases we had an error. We had an error in 18% of the cases, and 22% was correctly identified with our test data. So that's quite, not that bad, not that bad. It could be better, but it's not that bad. Given that how fast it was to train and test the data set. In contrast, artificial neural networks are way slow to train. So we would still be here for like many hours waiting for the system to train the multi-layer neural network. And as you will see shortly, the results were not that good as the decision tree. Here's how the decision tree looks like. If we were scrolling up to the results, we would also see the tree itself. So some results that we got there about the neural networks, that they had quite poor success rate. Decision trees were better for identifying the specific fault, for identifying the location of the fault. The success rate is higher because the problem is easier, just to say where the fault is, but what is the fault. I'm not going to stay that much in that, but the idea is that we can then use this framework to test different algorithms and then to experiment. So how much time do we have, Douglas?
About 10 minutes. Then we have some time for questions.
Okay. very briefly, are there any questions on this case study and how it's...
So how dynamic is this kind of learning? Do you always have to rerun this simulation, or can you add data points
You can add data points.
without having to rerun the entire thing? Does that make sense?
You are going to retrain the fault detection system with this enhanced data set, but you're not going to run the whole simulation again. So if you have run 1,000 simulations, and then you decide that, okay, I want to run 1,000 more, that's fine. You can just have a bigger training and data set, training and testing data set. You will not run again the 1,000 simulations that you have run already.
Right, no, but you create this kind of algorithm where it decides what type of faults there are, and you say, okay, that's not good enough, let me add more. Do you have to, like, I can imagine the systems get very large, so do you have to rerun with that old set and this new set, kind of a new algorithm, or can you kind of add in new data and already kind of have it set up? Like, it's a faster way to do
I
it.
suppose that it's a matter of, I would guess that the first idea would be to rerun your training and get like one new system. Of course, you could choose to train a different system, but train a different fault detection system. But in that case, given that the more data you have for your machine learning, the better system you're going to end up with. It is maybe advantageous to use as much data as you can for one system and not just add one more system because you have already trained one. And the training doesn't take that long. It's quite fast. If you choose like a good algorithm, even if at least this system was not that small, so I don't see it being an issue, the time for training. Are there any other questions about this case? Okay, so we have now a basic fault detection system. It looks at the whole plant, and then if there is a trigger that now something has happened, it monitors 3 minutes, and then it says, okay, based on my training, I think that I have a fault there. How could we make it a little bit better? So that was then an idea of how we can maybe continue doing this research. So how about using the functional decomposition of the system and then have an hierarchy of fault detection systems. Keep this plant-wide system that was working quite nicely, but then also add some specific function scope fault detection systems and use them together to maybe improve, maybe get some advantages, maybe improve our fault detection, maybe be able to figure out if some specific function is problematic and messes up our accuracy results, needs attention. And the most interesting thing is that since we have this kind of now many fault detection systems running in our plant, what happens if we have 2 faults with the constraint of this fault being in different functions? What if we have 3 faults? Can this now system, this new system, can it still identify at least one of these faults? Can it identify more? Can it identify all 3 of them? Given that the data sets that we start with are always single fault data sets, but still, can we identify 2 faults? Very briefly, we keep the same process for training this plant-wide fault detection system. We also train function-specific fault detection systems. So we split our data set then into function-specific data sets. Only the signals that are relevant to this function are used for faults that are contained within this function, component faults that are contained within this function. And then we have some reasoner at the end that gives us the output, what fault is present in the plant. The same idea here, how this thing operates. We connect our plant data into our plant-wide system, but also to our function-specific systems. And then we use this reasoner to get our prediction. I'm not staying that long here, but you could download, you could ask Douglas the slides and also check out some papers that are relevant to this. A small functional decomposition. So in this case that I showed you, this nuclear power plant, we had 17 basic functions. So this new system now has one plant-wide fault detection system and has 17 small fault detection systems, one for each function. So what are the results? Let's begin. Actually, we didn't get that much better results for single fault detection. It was a little bit better, but like 2% better. But when we did some more testing with some cross-validation methods, so we can sometimes, if our data sets are very small, then we can, instead of doing the separation between training and testing data set, we can use 90%, let's say, of the whole data set for training and just 10% for testing, and then do a rollover so that we use the whole data set for testing slowly. This is called like a 10-fold cross-validation when we roll over like this. But so that we can get many training and testing sessions so that we can have some error margins. So that's why this was done. So given the error margins, it was a little bit better, but we cannot say that it was really better. But the advantages are in a different area. Here we can see what are the success rates per function. So we can even say that if one function has kind of low success rate, we can isolate it and work more on it, get more signals from it. But the best results were for 2-fault scenarios and 3-fault scenarios. So in 2-fault scenarios, this is our new system here. It was able to identify one of the faults at a quite high rate compared to just a single fault detection system, and of course a single compared to a plant-wide, a single plant-wide fault detection system, and then of course only one fault detection system plant-wide cannot give 2 results of 2 faults, so it will give 0 anyway. But our system that uses all these functional fault detection systems models can give us results that many functions have failed in a specific way. And it was able for a small number of cases to identify both faults. So in three fault scenarios, again, we have a good amount of better results for one fault detection, one of the 3. The plant-wide system cannot give any results for 2 or 3 faults, but we had a quite good success rate to identify 2 out of 3 faults with this kind of hierarchical system. And we also even identified a few instances that we got all 3 of faults. And that's important because the data set that we started with had only single fault scenarios. We didn't train the system to identify 2 fault scenarios or 3 fault scenarios. So that's quite interesting.
I have a question. This on the identification, were those all? Did you lump all failures into one group? So false negatives, false positives. Are those lumped together, or when it says one fault was detected, did it always capture the correct fault? When it detected 2 of the 3, so did it always identify the 2 correct faults there?
So the way it worked there is that we then in this case we have multiple fault detection. We read the results from all the little fault detection systems. So the results of a fault detection, of a function fault detection system can be that there is a fault there is no fault. That's one result. But there is fault in another function. So I can detect a fault, but it's not me, someone else. And then the third option is that, yes, there's a fault in me, and then I think that it's this component that has failed in this way. So these are the 3 different outputs. So in this case, that we want to see how it performs in 3 fault scenarios. We pick them so that they're different functions. And then we see the results of the function fault detection systems and the plant-wide system. And then see that did we have any hits. So we know that the scenario was that valve A failed closed, the pump B failed open, failed working, and then valve C failed open. Do we have any hits from the results of our fault detection systems? So in case that we found out one fault, then it goes into this category that one of the faults was detected. If out of these results we have 2 faults of the scenario, then we have 2 faults were detected. Or if we actually get all 3 flagged that we gave 3 of the function fault detection systems gave the result of yes, we are in error, and this was the error, and this was actually what has happened. Then we have this case that we found all of them. So that's how it works. So what were we talking all this time? So basically, we were trying to discuss the problem of how could we use machine learning as a tool to build a fault detection system for a complex process. So how can we do it on our little simulator with our laptop, let's say, and then how we can test that this system works at what level does it, what kind of accuracy level does it have. So how can we then sell this system to a client or convince them that it's worthwhile deploying this system? How could we improve this process? As we discussed earlier, we have to use as big data set as we can. The bigger the data set, the better the system that we want to have at the end. We can use better methods for doing this feature extraction. So we have time series of data. How can we identify the interesting parts of this time series? How can we use maybe more advanced statistics to get more data out of the time series? Then how about if we don't have only these automation related faults, valves getting stuck open and closed, but if we have more faults, pipes leaking, faults that are related to the process itself. And then about the classifier itself, about the algorithm itself. As you have maybe saw, there are many options of what kind of algorithms we can use for this purpose. And each of these algorithms, there are many papers about how to optimize it for a given data set. So it's an art of the science to be able to know what kind of parameters you're going to use to train a specific algorithm. So I'm pretty sure that the results can be better if someone gives some time in the selection and parameterization of the algorithm. So this work was presented in two conference sessions in 2014 and this year in the ASME EDET-CE conference. You might know it or not, but if you are interested, you can ask me through Douglas for these papers if you want more details and more information. And these papers are quite maybe good for someone who enters the field, because I was learning and they contain a lot of educational literature review there. As I was learning about these things, I also wrote it down in the paper. So if you want to enter the machine learning field with the mentality of using it really for something real, then it might be nice to read at least the introductions and literature review part there and then check the references. That's it. That's it. Any more questions? I don't know if we have a few more minutes.
So I have one, you chose 3 features for your
Yes.
system. Why did you choose those 3 overall possible features that are out there?
They were easy to calculate.
Okay?
That's maybe the more important reason. It was easy to just read the data series and mark the maximum, minimum, and average.
Okay.
Because I needed to have the paper ready fast.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, but it is.
Well, so I would argue that, I mean, the features that you would choose would very much be a function of the system you're trying to detect and identify, right? And so,
Definitely, many parts of or many decisions in the development of these kind of systems can affect the success rate of the final system a lot, and I'm pretty sure that there is a scientific domain behind every single decision that I'm not really an expert in. Doesn't mean that I'm not interested in learning, but anyway, I cannot claim that I'm an expert. So this feature extraction itself is a big part of machine learning, how to do this feature extraction.
I would reinforce that. We found that without good feature extraction, it's really difficult to be successful.
Yeah, and I was really amazed that some of the past research, some of the papers didn't do it at all. They were just using the raw time series. And that was, it was kind of interesting. How could they get away with that? But yeah, I agree with you. It's something that definitely, if someone wants to develop this whole tool chain better, then they have to look also on this feature extraction and give options at least to the developer to choose how to process the data set.
Can you talk more about how you do the hierarchical separation with your data? In other words, you showed different results. So how is the hierarchical system different from your first FDI?
Yes. The first implementation was one fault detection system that was reading all the data.
All the data.
And was trying all the signals, like from the process, and was trying to identify if there is any fault anywhere in the plant. So out of this set of faults, with 92 faults, out of this set of faults, is there any one of these faults there? Or do we have a no fault situation? In the next step, then we kept the system running, but then we had these smaller systems that were chosen based on the functional decomposition of the plant. So we had then these 17 additional small fault detection systems. And the way that worked was that then from the data set to train and test them, I just picked up the signals that are relevant to these functions. So I knew that for every function, it is related to certain components of the plant. So only the signals that are related to these components were used to train and test the smaller function, and then the faults that this small system was trying to identify were only faults related to the components in this function. Plus, for another category was that faults in a different function, so somewhere else. So still I kept the rest of the data, but I removed the specific fault at the end because there was another function, but replaced that with that if you see this, then you have to say that it's a fault in another function. So the way I used it, I went quite fast there, but this information is used in the regioner at the end to improve the accuracy. So in the single fault detection, if all function, small function FDIs say that agree with themselves, so all of them but one say that there is a fault in another function, and one says that it's me, and this is the fault, but the plant-wide system says something else, so it has an error.
So then the reasoner says that the plant-wide system has an error. So I pick the function-specific output. So this is this 2% higher accuracy, this is where it came from.
So, and I'll stop talking then. So, for example, you might have cooling pumps, cooling system, circulation pumps, as a subsystem. Is that correct?
You can do the functional decomposition any way you like
Okay,
it to be.
okay.
Of course, you have to be kind of careful, because if you have, if you do the functional decomposition in a way that it follows the redundant subsystems, then you might have a problem, because usually, at least when the model that you're simulating is not that good, and the redundant systems are identical, and the fault in any of these, like, okay, let's say that we have 4 cooling subsystems in the reactor, and they all have a valve named A1, B1, C1, D1 for the four different systems. If our simulation is not that good, and the effects of closing A1 to the plant are exactly the same as the effects of closing B1, and exactly the same as C1, exactly the same as D1, because the person just copy-pasted the system for, or it was a component that he reused 4 times, then it's impossible to identify which one of these were at fault. So in that case, then you have to join these 4 faults into one class, because you recognize that this is in redundant subsystems, and it's impossible to recognize which one has failed. Then you can go back and get more data from the systems and so on. So the functional decomposition may have an effect on the accuracy and then how the fault detection will go on later, but it's up to the developer to go as high level or as low level as they want, and actually you have motivation to go low level for this multiple fault detection, because if you have very, very many small fault detection systems, then you have higher chances for 2 faults to be in different functions and be able to capture them. But it's, of course, a very big problem and interesting in my area, how to do the decomposition. Sorry, something. Any more questions?
Let's thank our speaker again.
What?